Thank you, Patrick. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I am going to start, which you all know, about Howard Lotzoff getting the patent in '85 for Ibogaine for narcotic addiction syndrome, interrupting that. And the important thing to say is that that patent has expired. And in the same year that I started MAPS in '86, Howard started NDA International for Ibogaine using the patent. And his approach was to try to raise money from investors. Mine was to try to raise money from donors. He began underground trials, in the Netherlands and treated a bunch of people. With that data, he was finally able to get NIDA involved in Ibogaine research. But Ibogaine is something that's a psychedelic, as we all know, and NIDA is very much about drug abuse. Even though Ibogaine is for the treatment of drug abuse, they weren't very interested. So there was a lot of efforts through the '80s to get NIDA to pay for some stuff. They did preclinical research of over $1 million. Separately, Howard was able to start Ibogaine research with Deborah Mash and Sanchez Ramos down at the University of Miami. Howard ran out of money. Deborah continued some of it with her own resources, identified noribogaine as the long-lasting metabolite. And then she tried to patent that. Howard said she couldn't. He owned it. She said, you didn't pay for all the studies. And that led to a whole bunch of lawsuits. And that really inspired me or made me feel despair. And so that's where I hired the patent attorney for Howard that got the patent on Ibogaine for opiate addiction and developed an anti-patent strategy. So to try to block people from getting use patents on MDMA. Now, finally, in '95, NIDA and MDD, Medication Development Division of NIDA, they had an Ibogaine protocol development meeting. I attended. They decided for political reasons not to fund Ibogaine research, not to go beyond the preclinical work. They blamed it on Olney's lesions. It wasn't, it was an exaggeration, the same as MDMA neurotoxicity. It was a bogus reason. Even if it were true, opiate addiction is deadly. The risks of Olney's lesions is much less than the risks of untreated opiate addiction. But this was a political decision wrapped up in a supposed scientific rationale. And these exaggerated safety concerns really made it so that the same thing as, looking through the telescope and discovering things the establishment didn't want you to discover, that this whole area was unfortunately politicized, and the science wasn't driving things. It was being driven by drug war ideology. And just to show you NIDA's, how frustrating NIDA is, many years though, after deciding not to invest anything in Ibogaine research, they gave Savant, a for-profit company, a $6.5 million grant to develop the non-psychedelic version of Ibogaine, 18MC. And Savant expected to begin human clinical studies of 18MC in Brazil early 2013, U.S. clinical development 2000. None of that happened. And nothing has come from this, really. And 18MC is probably not going to go very far in drug development. Mind Medicine used it as an early bogus story to now they have 1.6 or so billion dollar market cap, and now they're using their resources to buy legitimate stuff. But this is just to say that NIDA was willing to spend all this money on the non-psychedelic Ibogaine, but nothing on where it was really needed, and nothing has come from this, and super frustrating. And they gave it to a for-profit company without any strings, without any government ownership. We've not received a penny from the federal government for MDMA PTSD research. So this is turning into an anti-NIDA thing. Now we'll go into Ibogaine. So what MAPS then did through the 90s and 2000s is that we realized that nobody had ever done long-term observational studies on Ibogaine clinics. Ibogaine is illegal in the U.S., legal in most countries of the world. It's not a drug of abuse, and yet it was no clinical studies were going on. Deborah Mash started focusing on patenting all sorts of stuff, and there's not hardly anything in the public domain about what was been accomplished. So the best we could do was observational studies of clinics in Mexico and New Zealand. And we would do baseline, the Addiction Severity Index, the ASI, and then we would track people once a month for a year and would look at the longevity of their recovery. But this was a study where it wasn't so simple. You're either completely abstinent or you're not. This was using the Addiction Severity Index. And if the severity of addiction was reduced, that's something we could look at. It wasn't just an on or off determination of abstinence or not. And both of these studies, we got published in the American Journal of Alcoholism and Drug Abuse. And they both were very promising and suggested the need to move into clinical studies. Now, in order to do that, because a bunch of people have died from Ibogaine, from heart problems, we don't think that that's necessary. We think that that's something that under proper medical supervision, people shouldn't die. But to bring this back through the FDA, again, we're moving towards what's called a pre-IND meeting to summarize the world's literature on Ibogaine, go forward and discuss the safety issues and ask for permission for a phase 1/2 dose response safety study. And what I mean by phase 1/phase 2, phase 1 are safety studies, but when there are risks that are considered to be significant, like in cancer drugs, you wouldn't give cancer drugs to a healthy population. You do it in patient populations, but it's still designed primarily for safety, not for efficacy, although you may look at efficacy. So that's a phase 1/2 dose response safety study, because I think Ibogaine should start with people who have opiate addiction problems, but look at safety, specifically looking at the heart. And this would be designed to try to get permission from FDA to move into the safety study. And we anticipate this meeting could be 6 months or so from now. Now, meanwhile, while all that's happening, I was at the World Economic Forum, and Christian Angermeyer invited me to present to a group of people that he had gathered for a dinner. And at that dinner, he announced that he had bought, he, meaning a Thai, had bought all the patents that Deborah Mash had developed over the years. And so that her strategy, if it was focused on making money, worked great, because she was able to sell all these patents. But as I said before, to succeed, but maybe there's some ways we can collaborate. And so if there is unpublished data that a Thai bought from Deborah, we are going to develop and we're almost done with our investigators brochure, the summary of the world's literature on Ibogaine, to present to the FDA for the pre-IND meeting. But we will give some of this, we'll give the investigators brochure to a Thai to review. And if they want to add any unpublished data that they think would strengthen our case, they will do so. We'll have to agree not to make it public if that's what they ask us. And at the time, at least, Christian indicated that they were thinking to go first to Health Canada, and we would go through FDA and see what happens. And because they're for-profit and they have Compass has 1.6 or so billion. The Thai is planning to go public between $1 and $2 billion market valuation. They're hoping to raise all sorts of money. They've got the resources to go through and develop Ibogaine, but will they do it? Are they, going to do it in the same way? So we will at least go as far as we can with this pre-IND meeting and try to clear it up that there is a path forward, and then we'll see about it. But we don't have the resources at the moment to go the rest of the way. A Thai looks like they will have the resources, but what are they going to do? Since the core patent is expired, are they going to do something other than Ibogaine for opiate addiction? We don't really know yet. politically now, why is it so important to do Ibogaine research? Well, the first reason is that there's a tremendous need. That's why MDMA for PTSD is the only psychedelic-assisted therapy in phase 3, and we have a lot of public support and bipartisan funding because people a lot care for the veterans and other people, women with sexual abuse with PTSD. There's not good treatments. And so the first reason, of course, is that there's just an epidemic of people dying from opiate dependence and from fentanyl mixed in with opiates. We need to really do that for that. But the other reason for me, the political reason, this was about the 2016 election. These were social scientists, Case and Deaton, that looked at what are called despair deaths, which are deaths from alcoholism, from drug addiction, and from suicides. And in the counties that had increased mortality rates in white people with no college education from despair deaths, what we showed is that more people voted for Trump. This is about, but you can see also that if you had no college, the mortality rate went way up. For college or something. It didn't really change. Mortality went way down for blacks. So the idea here, at least for me, is that we have a situation where a lot of people in despair, they're being manipulated by their fears and anxieties, and they are voting for authoritarianisms. And so we need to both respond to a need to save all these people, to help prevent some of these opiate deaths and deaths of despair, and that we can spiritualize people in the same time, and then hopefully they won't be white nationalists or ready to give away their power to authoritarians. So I think for compassion and political reasons, Ibogaine is really, really important. There's bipartisan support. It's public that I can mention that Hunter Biden went through Ibogaine, and it was helpful to him in his struggle to overcome his own problems with addiction. Now, ICEERS is International Center for Ethnobotanical Education, Research, and Service, Ben Delonen, based in Barcelona. And the reason I'm mentioning them is that they have a study right now, which is low-dose Ibogaine increasing in amounts to help people withdraw from methadone. And so MAPS has donated a small portion of their money, like $35,000. They've raised a bunch of others. They need more resources. And it's something that they've done. I don't think that the patents from Deborah Mash will cover this, that the patents that Atai have purchased, if they will, there'll be patent struggles. But this is really the only, major research ongoing that I'm aware of with Ibogaine. There may be some in Brazil. I'm not sure anymore. There was some that was really good, but this study with increasing amounts of Ibogaine to help people withdraw from methadone is underway, and slowed down, of course, by COVID. But the initial few people have been treated, have gotten good results. And so just to end this was one of the patients in our study, in our Mexican study. I have my life back. My personality's back. I want to be more social again. It's like having your life handed back to you. And so I think that we really need more work with Ibogaine, and I want to do whatever we can to help out, and look forward to all of the people that are on this conference and other groups that are really moving forward with this issue. It's super important.